Hello, Trans Summit. This is so exciting.
It is really exciting. And
Yeah.
I am just honored to be sitting up here with you. I'm a big fan of Rain's work, as everyone has been kind of calling you out. You are a writer, producer, actor. You do a little bit of everything, and it's pretty incredible. We'll talk more about how Razor Tongue came to be, but how did the idea for the series really come to you?
That's a good question. It was about maybe 2 years ago now. The hashtag Me Too movement kind of, did its thing. And having worked on Transparent, I kind of found myself in a whirlwind of situations and just, consequences. And I had my own feelings about what was going on with, the people that I loved on the show and our lead actor, and a lot of things that I had bottled up having worked on that show for several seasons at that point. And during that time 2 years ago, it was just a matter of how do I communicate all of this thing that I've been feeling, not just necessarily with the show, but as an Asian American woman having to navigate the Hollywood industry. I'm always in a situation where some form of microaggression is happening, and putting trans on top of it just kind of makes it just even so much more unbearable. And misogyny is one of those things where you can't really see it. It's sort of like an internal infliction. It's something that you feel. And I wanted to create a character that kind of honors some of those moments where I'm able to find my voice and actually stand up for myself, but also give life to the person, the me, who walks out of a situation and feeling like, hey, that wasn't right. Like, I shouldn't have been asked that. I shouldn't have been spoken that way. And this is what I should have said. And so Belle kind of does that for me, kind of fulfills those two things for me. And I hope that it inspires people. And so I wrote the script in basically one weekend. And I have this artist collective called Now More Than Ever. Which Angelica kind of helped spearhead, because when we were, just doing the hustling and the grind, we would get together at her place or my place, and we would just read scripts out loud and just really just hone in on our craft as actors and creators. And so I kind of just took that idea and started inviting more people and turned it into this collective where anyone in the queer community can submit a script and we would read it out loud. And I started to realize there are so many scripts within our community that don't ever get a chance to have a voice, don't ever get a chance to be spoken out loud. And so it was an opportunity to be able to just see what's out there and what people are writing, and Razor Tongue was submitted into that and then became the first thing that we all made.
It's really incredible. I mean, Now More Than Ever artists, that's kind of what I want to get into. If you read through the credits, and if you've spent enough time in the trans community, the majority of the people, whether it's DP, music, social media, I mean, it's everything. Every part of this production is owned by the trans community, and specifically you and Now More Than Ever artists. So can you talk a bit how that, you mentioned a little bit about you and Angelica really honing that, but what has the process kind of developed into, and there are a lot of creative talents in here. How can people get involved?
I think it's a matter of, for me, with this being, Angelica being my sister, and, the Janet Mocks and the Laverne Cox of the world, I feel very privileged and honored to be one of the ones who get to. And really that's what it's about, is it's about not being the one, but being one of the ones. And, and also, thank you. And also, it's about finding someone or finding a community you want to move mountains with and for. And for me, it's always been the trans community. It's always been my trans sister. And so I didn't know how I was going to do it, but when I was able to book certain roles and work on reputable shows, I started to kind of have this reputation of being one of the ones. So it's really about taking responsibility, being responsible for the people that you represent, and it's a lot of work, and it's very, very stressful, and but at the same time, it's something that I'm very passionate about, and if there's something that you're passionate about and there's a community you want to uplift that you stand for, I think it's figuring out how to turn that into something. And once we were able to figure it out, it wasn't hard at all to find those people. It wasn't.
Well, and Razor Tongue is a perfect example of what happens when you get with those people that you want to move mountains with, because the production quality of this is just out of this world. I mean, truly, truly. And in addition to that, the actual story here, I mean, our panel conversation of it is about beyond the transition narrative, but it's really also beyond the trans narrative. I mean, Belle is so much more than just one identity, and I think so often when trans creators, and specifically for Razor Tongue, you're all in there kind of guiding that, you see fuller characters, not just Belle, but kind of everyone in this world. So can you talk about what the intention and motivation in that was? I know we haven't seen all the episodes, but...
Yeah, the main point was to just, well, as a trans woman and as, someone who's been in this for a minute, there's such a lack of content that's aspirational, which we've talked about in the last panel with King Esther, and for me, I want trans people, women, non-binary folks, and trans men too, to be able to find the content that makes them feel validated and makes them feel sexy and makes them feel like they can be a badass or an asshole the way Julia Roberts gets to be, or the way Sandra Bullock gets to be, and why not? I feel like we're all not just one side of the coin, and I read a lot of scripts, I go to a lot of auditions, and I turn down a lot of stuff that I just think isn't, and I think it's worth saying that, because if it's not in line with where this community needs to go, then I think it's important to stick with your artistic message, whatever that is for you, and wait for the right project to come along. And no offense to cisgender writers, but a lot of times the scripts that I read, if there's not a trans person in the writer's room, more often than not, that trans character will get outed in the first 5 pages, or their gender and their sexuality will be talked about within 10 minutes. And I don't think that that's fair, because you don't do that with cisgender characters.
And that doesn't happen in real life either. It's not, I mean, sometimes it does, but for the majority of those cis writers, they're always writing it. And that's just not representative of what's happening in real life. So I think it really is about being able to own those stories in a different way. And I love what you said about aspirational content and what we're talking about, because I know that you're a big rom-com person. I love me a good rom-com, and I really love this because not only is it aspirational, but I think it's also realistic.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit more about having trans people in relationships as a narrative that you've kind of really honed in on in your own work?
Yeah. Well, I grew up loving rom-coms. It's one of my favorite genres, and I can see myself relating to it just as someone who's a little awkward and a little just, who's a dreamer. But the thing with rom-coms is they have, because it's such an easily digestible genre that's super powerful and super influential, it establishes who gets to be loved. And if you watch all the rom-coms, like I've watched all the rom-coms, trans people are completely erased from it. So no one has yet told the world that trans people get to be loved in this genre. And for me, when I came to that realization, it just made me really sad, but it also empowered me to want to do something about it, which is why I think, what Pose is doing is really, really important, because it's not just a drama, it's also fucking funny. If you watch the show, it's fucking hilarious. Because again, we're not just one side of the coin. And same thing with King Esther, you see this woman who just like really owns it and really isn't afraid of the love that she deserves. And same thing with Belle, I think that she's just in a place in her life where she knows she deserves better than how she's been, being treated. And if a trans character is absent, if they're not erased from a rom-com, they're either, being vilified or shamed in it. And that's in the history of 150 years of filmmaking. So that's a lot of content that we have to battle.
Counter in a very real way, and I think so much of our lives are also informed by the media that we consume. So in addition to being a filmmaker, I'm also the Associate Director of Transgender Representation at GLAAD, and GLAAD with 2 A's, the Media Representation LGBTQ organization. And I think what we also see is that people who want to be allies, they get their social cues from the media that they consume. And so when they watch something like this, like I heard around me when we were watching, for people that haven't seen yet, some kind of like nervous about what the reactions were gonna be, because we are so used to the same narratives playing out.
Yeah.
And ourselves, I think, in addition to people who wanna be allies, internalizing that and then using that in real world context. Do you find that, is that something you think about when you're creating the work that you do?
I think for me, it's always about what the story is. And I think just because I've just been so trans for so long, that I can't tell a transitional story. I just can't. And if anything, there's so many people doing that I think, for me, it's telling a story that rings true to me and rings true to my experience as someone who's in her 30s and someone who's had a little bit of experience having been, post-transition for several years. And I think it's why it's so important that we get to do what we get to do now, because the content, her story, did not exist when I was in high school. It didn't exist when I was 10 years old. I didn't get to see anyone out there that I could look up to and think that, I could be a lawyer like Paige, or, and so in a way, we're kind of creating the content that we needed when we were younger. And if, to go deeper with that, is we're creating the content that, our younger trans siblings needs.
Right now.
Yeah.
I've been told we have to wrap up. I could talk to Rain for hours and hours. But I think the final thing, so there's a few more episodes of Razor Tongue. What do you hope the future is for Belle, for the series? How can people support your, and now more than ever, artists?
Thank you. There's 7 episodes, and it gets kind of crazier. And Belle gets herself into a situation where she's a little tongue twisted, and the Alexandra Gray, character just kicks ass. So if you haven't seen it, because we screened the whole series last night, it will be coming out online sometime soon. So follow Instagram at NowEverArtists to find out updates. And yeah, I kind of, my dream would be to make season 2, because season 2 is written, and all the characters including Magellan, played wonderfully by Sean Desani, comes back. But season 2, it's bigger, the world is bigger, the episodes are longer, there's more locations. Alexandra Billings just signed on to play a very pivotal role. But I don't know, we're gonna need funding and financing. If anyone has any ideas, I'm all ears. But I'll figure it out.
Rain always does figure it out. She is one of the most tenacious, incredible artists, not only in what you produce, but in the process and not asking for permission, just going and damn doing it. I have so much respect for her and everyone who's a part of it. Thank you so much.